Operation Greif. During World War II in 1944, American soldiers were preparing for battle in the Ardennes region of France. As they prepared themselves, they noticed what appeared to be Allied troops approaching from behind, accompanied by tanks and other American vehicles. Initially, they paid little attention to this, continuing with their preparations. Suddenly, the newly arrived group opened fire on them. This attack took the American soldiers completely by surprise. Confused and unable to comprehend the situation, they had no choice but to fight back. It soon dawned on them that the attackers were actually German soldiers, dressed in American uniforms. Even the vehicles they were using belonged to the United States military. In June 1944, the Allied forces of the United States and their allies invaded Normandy, France, a territory held by the Nazis at that time. In the following months, they regained control of Belgium and half of the Netherlands from the Nazis. Germany was slowly losing the war, so their notorious leader Adolf Hitler created a plan to fight back. Since the Allied forces had taken over much of Europe, their army was now spread out across different parts of the continent. Hitler decided to send a group behind enemy lines to take control of the city of Antwerp in the Ardennes region and its crucial port. The port of Antwerp was significant because it was where Allied forces sent supplies for those on the front lines. If the Nazis seized it, Allied forces would struggle to maintain their advance into Nazi territories due to lack of supplies. But this wouldn't be easy. Hitler's army first needed to attack and take control of the Meuse River bridges. The Meuse River is a large European river that flows through parts of France and Belgium. At that time, they needed to cross it to reach the city of Antwerp. The question now was, how could Hitler's army cross into enemy lines without being attacked by opponents? This led to the creation of Operation Greif or Operation Griffin. Operation Greif was a secret Nazi operation where a military unit would disguise themselves as US soldiers and infiltrate the enemy camp to disrupt their operations and regain control of selected parts of France. The mission was so confidential that many German officials were unaware of Hitler's plan. The operation members had different missions. Many of them would engage in combat with Allied forces to seize control of the crucial Meuse River bridges. A select team within the group was assigned to execute covert sabotage operations. They would bomb several Allied camps to destroy their ammunition supplies. They would also tamper with road signs and mine warnings to mislead Allied forces and potentially cause accidents. Most importantly, they would destroy Allied communication lines and spread fake orders to create more confusion. Of course, Operation Greif also had a reconnaissance group. Their mission was to monitor Allied camp conditions and analyze troop movements. Ultimately, they aimed to collect comprehensive intelligence that the Nazi Party could leverage to gain an advantage in the war. Even in vision, Operation Greif was undeniably challenging and dangerous. Many high-ranking officials from the Nazi army were not impressed by the operation's potential. Therefore, Hitler made sure to choose one of his most trusted soldiers to lead the operation, the notorious SS Commando Lieutenant Colonel Otto Skorzeny. At that time, Skorzeny was considered one of the most dangerous men in all of Europe. Born in Austria, his appearance alone was striking. Standing at 6 feet tall with a large scar on his face, he earned the nickname Scarface. Beyond his physical appearance, Skorzeny was better known for his impressive resume of extreme missions. He played a key role in the daring 1943 mission that liberated Italian Prime Minister Benito Mussolini from enemy captivity. When Hitler summoned him for Operation Greif in October 1944, he had just successfully supervised another high-level mission. His group had kidnapped the son of an admiral in Hungary, which led to the retirement of its regent. Skorzeny would lead Panzer Command 150, which would attack inside enemy lines with German soldiers disguised as American soldiers. On October 25, 1944, Skorzeny summoned for all Nazi soldiers with some knowledge of English. In the following months, the volunteers stayed in a training camp where they practiced daily for the mission and studied American culture. They studied American soldiers' mannerisms and commonly used military slang. a 21-year-old Operation Greif recruit, reported that they regularly viewed American war films to mimic most movements and speech patterns of US troops. Also, the recruits underwent intensive training in sabotage techniques and demolition tactics. The training outcomes fell short of expectations. Among the 2,500 operation volunteers, only 10 achieved fluency in English with an authentic American accent, while only 400 mastered basic English. To enhance the skills of those with limited English, they were dispatched to concentration camps. There, they were provided opportunities to engage in English conversations with imprisoned Americans. The German soldiers who were indeed fluent in English were placed in a special group tasked with infiltrating enemy lines. One of the most critical components of Operation Greif was the authentic American equipment and uniforms the soldiers would use. They needed to bring American vehicles and wear American uniforms to successfully pull off their disguise. For the operation, they planned to deploy 20 tanks, 30 armored cars, and 300 jeeps. Skorzeny informed various Nazi army units to collect different American vehicles. However, Skorzeny kept the purpose of this collection confidential, following Hitler's orders to maintain strict secrecy about the operation's preparations. In fact, many of the operation's volunteers were unaware of their true mission until they were already in the field. In the end, they managed to collect only a small number of American vehicles from their various units. They only managed to obtain 2 tanks, 4 armored cars, and 30 jeeps. Despite the shortage of escort vehicles, they proceeded with the operation. They used German vehicles instead and painted them to look like American vehicles. This wasn't the only problem the operation faced. Impersonating enemy soldiers was strictly forbidden by the Geneva Convention, the international treaty governing the conduct of war. As a result, many American captives of the Nazis refused to hand over their uniforms, and many Nazi soldiers also refused to assist in getting the required uniforms for the operation. Regardless, the operation continued. To identify their allies, the soldiers placed a yellow triangle on the back of their tanks. They also positioned their tank guns at a 9 o'clock angle. These were the signs that the group consisted of German soldiers disguised as American soldiers. For their disguise, they wore American uniforms but added blue scarves to identify fellow German soldiers. From the start, American intelligence had suspicions about a strange German plan. These suspicions arose when they intercepted an order on November 30th from Nazi secret commando operations requesting English proficient volunteers. While American officials considered the possibility of Germans impersonating US soldiers, they eventually dismissed the idea because it seemed unlikely and the information was too easy to obtain. On December 16, 1944, Panzer 150 launched its attack towards enemy lines. They successfully crossed into Allied-held territories in the Ardennes region. 2 Allied military units were caught off guard by their attack, as they didn't expect enemies to come from within their own territory. This incident made the Allies realize that the infiltration of German soldiers into their camp might be true after all. The next day, an American jeep carrying 4 soldiers was stopped at an Allied checkpoint near a bridge when they couldn't provide the correct password for Allied soldiers. The soldiers sounded American and wore American uniforms, but they couldn't show any credentials to prove they were indeed American soldiers. The Allies promptly ordered the 4 soldiers out of the jeep and thoroughly searched their vehicle. Inside, the Allies found concealed explosives, pistols, contraband money, and swastika emblems. Under intense questioning, the 4 soldiers eventually admitted they were German operatives disguised as Americans. In the following days, the captured German soldiers underwent further interrogations. The 4 soldiers convinced their captors that many more like them were scattered across various parts of France. Also, they convinced the Allied forces that Skorzeny had sent them to kill General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the top American commander. The Allied forces believed the captured German soldiers' deceitful claims for 2 reasons. First, the U.S. 106th Infantry Division found a document outlining Operation Greif's deception tactics when they captured an enemy group near Heckenscheid. Second, they were aware of Skorzeny's reputation as a daring and skilled commando. In response, the Allies dramatically increased Eisenhower's security, isolating him to prevent potential assassins from getting close. They even went so far as to have Lieutenant Colonel Baldwin B. Smith, who resembled Eisenhower, appear in public as a decoy. However, the feared assassination attempt never materialized. The U.S. forces intensified their security measures. They established roadblocks and checkpoints on as many roads as possible. Further, they created a list of questions that they thought only real U.S. soldiers could answer correctly. The questions typically focused on U.S. state capitals, movie stars, baseball players, politics, and other elements of American culture. These questions were so challenging that even a real American soldier was once pulled from his vehicle and interrogated when he couldn't correctly answer a question from the Chicago Cubs baseball team. However, the tightened Allied forces' security measures most severely affected British soldiers who weren't very familiar with American culture. In fact, many of them were interrogated because of this. One such incident affected British Brigadier General Bruce Clark, who was questioned about the Chicago Cubs baseball team. Unable to provide the correct answer, he was held for 4 hours until his identity was confirmed. If this happened to Allied soldiers, it was even harder for disguised German soldiers to slip through. That's why the Allies' paranoia actually helped strengthen their defense against Operation Greif. In total, 44 German soldiers wearing U.S. uniforms and pretending to be U.S. military were sent to enemy lines. However, only 8 of these soldiers successfully returned to Skorzeny. Besides the Allies' strict security measures, another reason for the operation's failure was that the Germans' limited resources to convincingly impersonate U.S. forces, especially when it came to their U.S. uniforms. In fact, during an encounter at the Bognes Crossroad, the American 120th Infantry Regiment quickly realized that the American assault guns in front of them were actually disguised Germans. They quickly defeated these disguised Germans and destroyed their 11 vehicles. On November 19th, Skorzeny deployed the last group of German soldiers for Operation Greif before ending it. He recognized that the plan wouldn't succeed anymore since the Allies had lost the element of surprise. The Allies now knew about the operation, and their tight security made it impossible for Germans to sneak through. Operation Greif was one of Adolf Hitler's last desperate efforts to turn the tide of World War II in Germany's favor. While the operation's Panzer 150 unit ultimately failed, it did manage to create significant confusion among Allied forces.